Hey, what is up, everybody? Michael Crump back here again, talking about the latest and the greatest in PlayStation homebrew news and much, much more. So, if you haven't been keeping up with PlayStation homebrew news here recently, obviously there has been a ton of different developments, and one in particular that has been causing a lot of talk in the scene has been these 60 frames per second patches that you can apply now for a number of PlayStation 4 games over on your PlayStation 5. Now, right now, it only really supports two PlayStation 5 games, and one of those, it does the debug menu. The other one, it does give you the 60 frames per second. But this is going to be for folks that are looking to get a little bit more out of their PlayStation 4 games on a PlayStation 5 that is currently jailbreakable. So if you want to learn more about how to activate these 60 frames per second patches on your PlayStation 5, then I would highly encourage you to go ahead and check out this video right here. I'll put a link to it into the description below. So in this video today, I wanted just to cover a couple of kind of tips and tricks that I've learned as I've been testing and experimenting with these 60 frames per second patches. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump straight into it. So taking a look at Illusion's GitHub repo, we can see that a brand new release just came out yesterday. And if we look over in the commits here, we can see what was added in that. So there was a Mafia Definitive Edition 60 frames per second patch. And then there was a couple of fixes for, again, games like RDR and for Batman Arkham Knight. If we go over now to the releases and let's grab 1.77. So just scroll down to where you see the assets and just download this zip file to your hard disk drive. Now, again, if you followed my tutorial previously, you should have everything already set up. So I'm not going to kind of go through all the Python and all the other stuff that was associated with it. Definitely check that video out if you want to learn more about that. But once you get that downloaded, let's go ahead and take a look at what the contents of that zip file contains. You will need to get your IP address of your PlayStation 5. So you can obviously get that through your network settings and then view connection status. So I have went ahead and downloaded and extracted that zip file from the GitHub. And as you can see right here, here are the files that comes included with that release. Now, you will obviously want to go ahead and run the pip install AIO files if you haven't already. I typically just go ahead and do this each time I download a release, but it really isn't that necessary. Now, in order to get the basic 60 frames per second patches running, it's just as easy as typing in Python space send_elf.py and then the IP address. Of course, over on your PlayStation 5, you will need to obviously go ahead and run whatever host exploit that you use for your PlayStation 5. And now once you see this screen right here, then you can just go ahead and run that command that we just typed in. And there you can see over on the PlayStation 5, everything is working perfectly. This is that once you load these 60 frames per second, you already have an FTP server that is running. It is showing that it is already serving an FTP on this IP address with port 1337. So you don't have to go back and send another payload such as the FTP payload in order to get FTP after you've ran this 60 frames per second patch. So if I go ahead and I load up FileZilla, you can see the IP address matches right here and the port is still at 1337. So now I can just simply press connect. And there we go. I have FTP access. And I can do things like read and write files, etc. So again, you wouldn't have to come over here and send this individual FTPS in order to get FTP access. I just wanted to kind of drive that home. Okay, so if we go ahead and rerun Bloodborne, then we can see that right there it is showing that the 60 frames per second has been patched. And then once you select play offline, like I'm doing right here, you can see that it says this 60 frames per second patch was made with love by Lance McDonald. Now, one thing you can do is you can enable or disable these patches. Okay, so you can press the square and the triangle button in order to disable the patches. If you come back to the main menu of your PlayStation 5, such as where I'm at right now, and you press the square and the triangle button together, then there you go. It says user requested to patch games is equal to false. Again, you can turn that right back on by pressing the square and the triangle button, and now it's turned back on. And if you're wondering why is that significant in order to learn how to turn on and off these patches, well, back over in the GitHub, you can see that there are such games that may encounter a soft lock if you don't disable them. So Bloodborne, for example, the notes say you may encounter soft locked during Lawrence cinematic, so disable the patch to progress. There is a couple of other ones that has that note too, such as Gravity Rush 2, as well as the Order 1886. So it's extremely important that you learn how to do that. Now, the next tip involves how to activate some of the other features which aren't 60 frames per second. So going back to Bloodborne, we can see that there is a debug camera that is also included in this release. Now, in order to enable that debug camera, it says that you need to hold X and press L3 to toggle the cam modes. So let's go ahead and let's give that a shot. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I am going to hold down the X button and I'm going to press the L3 button, and there you go. Here is the debug camera that you now have access to. So this brings back a lot of memories for me because this patch occurred many years ago. And I do remember playing around with that, even though I really wasn't that big of a fan of this game. But it's pretty cool that you have access to a debug camera that you can play around with this game and really a bunch of other games. And then my next kind of tip or trick here is going to be that if you come back to the actual release itself, you may notice that there is a Launch.py. Now, it was noted in the quick setup portion of Illusion's GitHub that it says you can also find useful commands within the Launch.py and its arguments. So I went ahead and I've navigated to where that Launch.py is. So the next one is just launch. So you could launch an app. So in this example, we again are passing our IP address and then an app ID, whichever app we want to go ahead and launch on our PlayStation 5. Now with the launch, there is also a kill. So if we look to see how maybe one of these commands could be used, we can scroll right down into this and we can see that the usage is you specify the launch.py, you provide the PS5's IP address, and then you provide in the title ID. Now, the title ID of Bloodborne is just simply this right here because I am using the US version. So we could put all of this together by going back to our command prompt and running a Python launch.py and then providing the IP address and then the title ID. So let's go ahead and let's switch to the PlayStation 5. I'm now just going to simply run that command and it should automatically launch Bloodborne. So I'm going to go ahead and run it now on my PC and there you go. And I do promise I did not run that myself with the controller. It was ran through the command prompt. But that is very cool that you can do things like this right now on a PlayStation 5 that has a jailbreak available. Now, another thing that seems to happen quite a bit is that sometimes it just gets hung up. And there's a couple of things that you can do in order to remedy that. Obviously, the first one is that you could go ahead and try a restart, or other situations you may want to turn off the PlayStation 5 and bring it back up and run through the exploit process again. But there is a script that is inside of the repo or the files that you downloaded, and it's just called killdaemon.py. Now, if it is currently running, like mine is right here, you could simply come back over here and you could type Python kill daemon.py and then space the IP address. So once you do that and you press return here, you will note right over here on your command prompt, it is now back to where it was at before. And so if you do want to go ahead and spin that back up again, obviously what you need to do is rerun the exploit. And after you rerun the exploit, then you can simply rerun this command, which was the Python sendelf.py and then the IP address. Okay, so the last thing that I have for you is that maybe you went ahead and you took out your disc for Bloodborne because you are through playing it, but you do happen to have another game that Illusion has support for, and you decide you want to play that. You may be wondering, do you have to go through all of those steps again in order to play it? Well, the good news there is that you don't. You can just simply take that disk out, put your other disk into the system, and just like I'm doing right here, I'm about to start this up, and it will automatically have those 60 frames per second patches ready to go. 5 of my kind of tips and tricks with using the 60 frames per second patches that we have. Hopefully you learned something out of this tutorial, and please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you on the next one. Michael